What's up, guys? It's Q&A time on, it is April 3rd, 2019. I did another open Q&A this week and had a lot of questions. I always try to cut them off in time, but I didn't pay attention to the thread for about 30 minutes, and next thing I know, there was a bunch of questions. So I'll go ahead and try to get through all of them, but good variety here. So we'll dive into it. When utilizing Yohimbine for fasted cardio, is there an optimal time frame after taking it that you should start the cardio? Also, when pulsing it during the fast, is there a time frame for taking dosages every 2-3 hours, or is it a tolerance thing? And is there a best time to take it when you're going to take in the first meal? Is there a best time when you're going to take in the first meal after 24-hour fast? Okay, so yeah, it kicks in pretty quick. It's not like growth hormone, where it takes, 3 hours to fully mobilize fatty acids. It's going to work pretty fast. Normally, it works quick enough to where it's more of a practicality thing for people, as long as you're not popping it right before you jump on your treadmill or bike or, stairs or whatever. Then it's normally fine. 30 minutes or so is completely fine. Every 2 to 3 hours is, yes, that is okay, because, once you go through a couple half-lives or half-life, it's going to start dropping off. The levels in your blood's going to start dropping off, so you can redose it. Now, you could do it that way in smaller doses, or you can wait a longer period and then fully dose it again. So if the person is 200 pounds and they end up taking 20 milligrams, work up to the full 20, then they could do 20 in the morning and then wait. If they're fasting, say they said 24 hours, so if they're fasting about that long, they can wait another 5 to 6 hours, hit another one, and another 5 to 6 hours and hit the last one. Assuming, as long as you're not going to take it too late in the day where it's going to impact your sleep, but you could probably get 2, maybe 3 full doses in there. And you'll get a full benefit. So yes, you could do the smaller pulse closer together, or you could wait a full, 5 to 6 hours and do a larger, just redose it again at full, at the full dosing. So either option, I would say, probably depends on tolerance at that point. Less tolerance, they're probably going to want to stick with the smaller pulses. Larger tolerance, they might be able to do the bigger ones. So I hope that answers the question. I feel like I'm missing something, but I think that covers it. Next one, what is the max dose of T3 you can take with or without Clen if it differs, and how long do you usually run them? No, it doesn't really matter. There's not like a contradiction between the two that would make the dose different. So no, that does not make a difference. Well, the max dose is really going to vary person to person. You don't want to take so much that you are exhibiting symptoms of hyperthyroidism that would actually, cause more problems. Things like tissue loss and anxiety and just jitteriness and lack of sleep, and it can impact a lot of things. And I feel like that is a potential mistake that some people make when they do these massive, 100 micrograms, 150, 200. I've seen 300 microgram doses. That's crazy. I mean, nobody needs that, and you're definitely going to have side effects from it. So a lot of people can work up in that 75, 100 range, maybe without a lot of side effects. But even then, it's normally not necessary for people. In most cases, if people stay towards the high end of their normal physiological range, they're going to function pretty well. You might, and if you're in a pinch and you really need to push the fat loss and push the caloric burn, you might go a little bit above that normal physiological range, but you don't need to go way above, because again, you will have hyperthyroid, symptoms. So most people, if they start in that 25 to 37.5 range to kind of get that replacement dose, then they might ramp up to 50, maybe a little bit more at most, but most people don't really need to go higher. How long? I mean, as long as you need, really. I don't know that there's any good evidence that would show you're going to have a greater chance of damage or shutdown or something like that if you take it longer versus shorter. I mean, there's people that have abused it for years and come off and recovered. So I think if you're going to have an issue, you're going to have an issue regardless, but it's extremely uncommon that people don't recover from it. Now, Clen, on the other hand, you're talking about something that could potentially have cardiovascular side effects. I talked about this on the last one, so if you want to listen to that, you can, but you're talking about something that's a stimulant essentially, so you wouldn't want to take that forever. 12 weeks, maybe some people do 16, but you don't need to go longer than that. And even that's a bit of a stretch for a lot. So next one, does taking laxatives when near the end of prep hurt the absorption of the food you're ingesting? Yeah, potentially, depending on what kind of laxatives you're taking. Like, I understand that can be something people may have to do just to have a good bowel because, food volume's low, stress is high, so their autonomic nervous system's not maybe functioning real well. There's not really a lot of options when you're that close to the show. It's not like you can just stop doing everything. You can try to manage stress the best way possible. But yeah, a lot of funky things can happen with digestion that close to a show, Now, it's going to also depend on, what kind of laxative are you taking? Are you taking a stimulant laxative like senna leaf, for example, that's going to go in and stimulate a bowel, or something like a suppository potentially that's going to work a little bit differently. So maybe that suppository route might be a little bit better. It's not going to pass through the entire GI tract. That's not to say that it won't pull out undigested food, but it probably will be a little less prone to do that. Obviously, try not to use these things unless you absolutely have to. I mean, I've definitely had situations with clients where it's a kind of a last ditch effort, a few days out from a show or something, we need to get a bowel, we need to get the digestive tract cleared out. It's not going to hurt anything at that point, really. If you miss a little absorption of food, it's not really going to be that big of a deal. Now, if you're taking a bunch of laxatives on days you're like loading for the show or something, yeah, I mean, that's going to be bad news, obviously. But as long as you're not abusing it and you have to do it to take, get a bowel and clear your GI tract, there could be merit in doing it. It's just, you obviously don't want to get carried away with it. Okay. All right, so looks like we'll go over to Facebook, and I have one that I missed on the last one that was in my messenger. So I want to make sure I get that, and then I will get all the ones in my normal thread. So we'll go ahead and do, let's see here. Let's go ahead and do the messenger question first. Okay. It's a long one, so bear with me. I'll start off by saying I'm not using insulin right now, but I am taking 500 milligrams of Metformin HCl with my last meal every night. I wake up with a blood glucose level around 60 every day, and it returns to that fairly soon after my meals, so good postprandial. Very nice. And I do tend to go a little hypo post-training if I don't eat within 30 minutes, and I've always been this way. I do go hypo easier the day after a refeed. Not really sure why. Is this anything to be concerned with? My pre-workout meal is 50 protein, 60 carbs, 10 fat, and my intra is 20 protein, 70 carb. Sure, I could up the fats a little bit to slow digestion while keeping blood glucose stable or increase carbs in my intra, but what about when trying to reduce caloric intake? My first concern is the low blood glucose. Are there any possible issues there? Second, why is it the day after a refeed I go hypo and post-training easier than other days? Lastly, how would you go about fixing the low blood glucose while trying to tighten up? Okay, so several questions. That's okay. So first thing I would say, it sounds like, and I could have asked, but it sounds like that the person is in a caloric deficit, and with a blood glucose of 60, I mean, 60 is even hypo for some people. Some people are going to feel hypo, have hypoglycemic symptoms at 60. Some won't, some will. I tend to, at about that level, I'll start feeling it. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's super relevant to this person. They might have a lot lower baseline than me, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. But probably don't need the metformin. If they're using any other kind of glucose disposal agents or anything, probably don't need them at all, to be completely honest. I assume hyperinsulinemia is not an issue, so it's not a case of high insulin levels that are bringing blood glucose down too much. So I would first probably take out the metformin and just let a little more hepatic glucose come out, and that is one of the compensatory, you know, mechanisms by which your body's going to raise blood glucose levels. And there's more than that. There's others, but you know, that's one of them. So if you can kind of free that up, your body might be able to keep up with you going a little hypo. But it sounds like you're still eating pretty sufficient amount of carbohydrates. Now, yeah, you could up the fats a little bit, but I mean, 10 grams of fat isn't trace fats. It's something. It's definitely doing something. Now, it's hard to say, depending on meal timing, like how much that pre-workout meal really plays into it. You know, are you eating 45 minutes before the session or 2 hours before the session? Because I mean, that glucose is going to clear pretty quick. If you're baselining pretty quickly after a meal and you're eating, you know, hour and a half before your session, I mean, the 60 carbs pre-workout aren't really playing into the session a lot. They're cleared. You're back to baseline. So it's more so your intra-workout. Now, I would maybe also look into intra-workout carb source as well. Get something that has a little bit slower gastric emptying. And I've actually run into this issue with things like highly branched cyclic dextrins that have such a fast gastric emptying. Not only do they potentially cause GI issues, not saying they do here, but they do clear so quickly that the people are going hypo. So it's almost a case of where, you know, the insulin isn't really queuing up timing wise with the carbs because because the glucose is in and out so quick. So I would probably slow down the intra-workout carb source a little bit, maybe even cut it, you know, if it's 75, maybe even cut it like 50 with something faster and 50 with something more normal, just like a dextrose or something, or you know, some ratio in there, and try that. And I bet that the gastric emptying will slow down and you will probably sustain blood glucose levels a lot better. Now, so there's two things right there that I would probably try right off the bat. And then, why is it the day after the refeed do I go hypo post-training? I've seen this in some people, and I assume that it's just some of those compensatory mechanisms are really thrown off on those really high carb days. So, you know, if you're having such a flux on the high carb days that we're talking, you know, hormones like glucagon, for example, we don't need any of those mechanisms on those refeed days because we have sufficient carbohydrates. So of course they're going to downregulate, right? Just like insulin's going to upregulate when we're eating more on the refeed days. So my assumption is that they just don't really catch up as quickly as we might want them to. Now, that could be totally off, but I have noticed it in some people. But then, you know, like the second day following the refeed, they're fine. It's more so right after the refeed that it happens. So I've always kind of assumed that those compensatory mechanisms aren't really caught back up yet, and they're kind of dormant, I guess, if you will. But again, same stuff. You can still do the blend of carbs. You can still slow down that gastric emptying. You can still slow down that glucose absorption a little bit. I don't think you necessarily need to add fats to do that. It can just be a carb source. And I have a lot of people do carb blends like that for that reason, for the digestive purpose, and then also the slowing of gastric emptying, and it controls blood sugar a lot better. And then the last question was, how do you go about that while trying to tighten up? Like, yeah, like I said, I don't think you need to add the fats in there. I would just use slower carb sources. Yeah, that would probably be my first go-to there. So I hope that answers the question. If not, if that still doesn't work, feel free to follow up and I could dive in. I could always probably get a little more context on this and be able to help more, but I would probably start there. Okay, let's go over to Facebook. Some questions over here. Your go-to Supps to increase insulin sensitivity. All right, so just from a supplement basis, most glucose disposal ingredients, so Metformin, even though that's not necessarily over the counter, a lot of people use that. Berberine over the counter works very well. Now, I think one thing to remember here is that not all of them are going to be the same. A lot of people say GDA and they kind of lump everything into the same category when in reality, they're a little bit different mechanistically. Like you have Metformin or Berberine, which are going to primarily decrease hepatic glucose output, whereas something like, give you another example, something like Banaba, that is more of a shuttling, like an insulin mimetic. Okay, so you can use the insulin mimetic type ingredients. There will be a really good glucose disposal agent from Morphogen coming out, hint, hint. So keep an eye out for that. But there are others out there. Like chromium polyniconate, that can work if you have, some people it seems to work, some people it doesn't. Vanadium, kind of the same way. Some people it seems to work, some people it doesn't. Cinnamon works well on a lot of people. Banana leaf works well on a lot of people. There's several others. Actually, and then, of course, slowing down the hepatic, so also adding berberine or metformin in there. And then there's a whole slew of lifestyle factors and stuff that are going to play into the sensitivity. And I can link you up to actually, take that back. Within that question, my article is already linked in there, so check that out. And there's an even larger list of those supplements as well. Because I like I said, it kind of depends on the application. They don't do the same thing. They're not all glucose disposal agents, quote unquote. So next one, Cpap Face. Went to the gym 12 hours after waking. Noticed a clear imprint of my Cpap mask in my face. What the fuck? I know I'm aging, but I don't want to look like I've just removed my Bane mask before training. Is this a collagen fail? Plant-based eating issue? Perhaps. I consume glycine. Okay. What can I do to help? Would D-ball moon face help or worsen? Or should I just wear another type of mask? That is more phantom, another type of mask for the gym, like the Phantom of the Opera one, anonymous something. Well, it could be like a slight edema issue. I mean, if you have edema all over your body, you're gonna know it. But it could be just like it could just be like a slight water retentive issue in the face that you're having, that's causing that imprint. But yeah, try a different mask. The collagen thing's interesting. It could be if you're consuming glycine, maybe not, probably not. But probably try the D-ball. That's probably a good solution. But honestly, I'd probably just try another mask. Unless you're like super water retentive and you have just a really like bloated ass face where it is leaving like these divots from so much water in your cheeks, I probably wouldn't sweat it too much. You're just gonna have to deal with it. I don't have a good answer for that one. Probably have to change the mask, I suppose. Okay, controlling cortisol and stress water retention as well as hormone balance to boost metabolic rate. I'm not sure if that's a question. There's a question mark, but that's a lot of things. Well, yeah, controlling stress in general is going to have a positive impact on body composition. I actually just made a post the other day talking about how cortisol doesn't necessarily cause fat gain. Chronically, yes, it can potentially lead to fat storage, but short term, it actually liberates fats or frees fatty acids, or however you want to state it, for burning. Think of like exercise, for example. That's an acute reaction. So yeah, it's not bad in that regard, but chronically it certainly is. And this hormone balance to boost metabolic rate. I'm not sure which hormones you're talking about specifically. Sorry. Maybe after this is posted, maybe just if you have like a very specific question, if you're talking about thyroid hormones or different various sex hormones or something entirely different, just ask or add it to the next Q&A in a little more detail. I definitely love the hormone question, so I'd be happy to dive into it. Okay. Using metformin for bodybuilding purposes, how would you use it? Every day or only on high carb days? Or is it even useful? Well, it doesn't have to be taken with carbs. It could just be used every day. I mean, it might be a little more helpful in high carb days, but it's not like you don't have to take it with your carbohydrates. Again, it's one of the situations where you're not going to take it. It's not an insulin mimetic that's going to directly shuttle glucose. So you don't have to take it in that way. But just take it daily, or, it's okay. So actually I'm going to rephrase that, because they said every day or only on high carb meals. So that's an easy question to answer. Just take it every day. Yeah. I already answered the high carb meal question. Yeah, it's just not necessary to take with high carb meals, because that's not really how it works. So maybe if you have a high carb day, or you're rotating carbs, like carb cycling in some way, you may take it on the higher carb days and maybe not on the lower carb days, but you can absolutely take it every day. It doesn't have to be taken with carbs. You may potentially want to take it with meals if it causes any kind of GI upset, but outside of that, it doesn't matter when you take it. It's going to work the same regardless. Last one. Will going a couple days per week, non-training days, eating only trace carbs from veggies, be enough to help sustain insulin sensitivity? Maybe, but there's a lot of context to this. So if a lot of people will do this like in an off season or a surplus situation where they do it, but they're increasing fats a lot, and it doesn't really work that well. And it does. It works well for some people, but others it doesn't. Like I've had people that they'll actually have higher blood glucose days, or higher blood glucose following days that they do high fats. They just don't digest fats well. And indirectly, those fats can cause insulin resistance as well. So, I mean, it's going to really vary person to person. I would try it. I would literally test your blood glucose after both days and see what the difference is. If you're adding fats to these trace days, then I would definitely want to see if it's actually helping. Like you should have lower blood glucose the following day, unless it's like gluconeogenesis issue or something, but that's normally not the case in most people. Like typically blood glucose is going to go down if it's helping. So just check it and see what the actual effect is from those days. Now, it might not be drastic, but it should be something. Now, like I said, if you're adding fats and the fats are actually causing blood glucose to go up the following day, then you probably don't digest fats well. So you can either correct that issue through potentially like increasing bile acids or stomach acid, then yeah, you can do that. Or just don't do the fats. Just lower your carbs on the day and leave your fats the same. And, but man, there's just so many other potential things. Like a lot of people will do this, but they don't even come out of a deficit or come out of a surplus. I think that you could even go maintenance or even like a very, very slight deficit on those non-training days. Now that's going to help insulin sensitivity. Just the act of coming out of that caloric surplus is going to help, and it's not going to impact your total caloric surplus for the week. So you can still progress really well that way. course, adding GDAs, a whole bunch of lifestyle factors. Like I mentioned, that article is posted above. So there's a lot of context to that, because I've seen it literally go both ways. I've seen the fats and low carbs fail terribly. I've seen it work very well. If you're not adding fats, it should probably work. So yeah, I hope that helps. That's it, guys. So I will get this up. We'll talk to y'all next time.